Welcome to a Pulp event podcast, brought to you by the PulpNet, your link to the online world of the pulp magazines, since 1996, online at thepulp.net. In this Pulp event podcast, Rusty Burke talks with Pulpcon guest of honor Glenn Lord about Robert D. Howard and the pulp magazines. It was recorded in 2007 at Pulpcon 36 in Dayton, Ohio. Here is Rusty.
All right, well, I want to start off with a simple question. How did a nice kid from Pelican, Louisiana get involved with pulp magazines in the first place?
Pulp magazines I finally ran into when I was going to school at Alexandria, Louisiana. Someone had bought some plant stories and I borrowed them and read them. So I started go buying plant stories and FFM and FN off the stand when I could afford them, which was very seldom at the time. I lived out in the country, and needless to say, I didn't have a whole lot of money. I still don't have a whole lot of money before that goes.
What were your favorites early on?
You mean
In the pulp, in the pulps? What were your favorite writers?
Oh, I liked Paul Anderson and Ray Bradbury and others of that ilk.
How did you discover Robert E. Howard?
That's a long story.
Good, I'll sit back here and let you tell it.
It depends on your point of view. You can credit it to, or if you prefer, blame it on a guy named Reverend M. Day from South Ozone Park, New York. I was corresponding with him. Day was a fan, a small-time publisher, and a sometime bookseller. When I moved to Pasadena, Texas, and got a job, I could afford more books, so he started selling books, and he recommended the Arkham House, Skullface, and others. At that time, Arkham House was kind of in bad shape, I think. They were selling their books at discount. I got Skullface for $4, which is not a bad price, I suppose, nowadays. So I read it, and I liked it. So I started looking for other Robert E. Howard stuff. The only thing available at that time was the non-press Conan the Conqueror. Then I got invited, if you won't call it that, to the United States Army. So I wound up in Korea. That's what you call a career in the Army. And so I was 52 and part of 53, most of 53 in fact. So I came back to the United States and I found out that the pulp magazines had just about all disappeared off the stands. So at that time I read a couple of the Arkham House poetry collections, you know, Clark Ashton Smith, Hornbook for Witches by Leo Bodine Drake. I liked the looks of those books, and I had seen some Howard poetry in Dark of the Moon by August Derleth. And I liked Howard's poetry, so I thought, well, it'd be a great idea if somebody were to collect the Howard poetry and put it in book form. So I got permission from Oscar Friend, who was a Howard agent, and I managed to collect the published poetry out of Weird Tales and a few fanzines. Donald Waldheim got the collection, excuse me, got the poems out of Malvern American Poetry Farm, an American poet, out of the New York Public Library. And I went to Cross Plains thinking, I went to Brownwood thinking that the Howard Payne University Library would have a Robert E. Howard collection. Well, that was just a myth as far as that goes. Very regardless of what the yearbooks used to say. There was a guy named Dr. Thomas M. Havens there. He gave me a copy of the Howard poem, The Tempter. And I ran across a guy named, let's see, Bill Chambers, I believe he was, in May, Texas. He was I believe he was a farmer in that area, but he had a son named Norris Chambers, who had been connected with Howard at one time. Norris Chambers, it turned out, had a few unpublished Howard poems, so I got those through my good friend Dale Hart, and we include that in Always Comes Evening. My first idea was to publish Always Comes Evening myself, but I found out I couldn't get it published, or I shouldn't say published, I meant printed inbound at a price I could sell it for about $3 for. So Durley suggested I send the manuscript to him, and he was into George Banner. George Banner bid on it and gave us a pretty good price. But Durley told me that Banner would not accept a new customer. So he suggested that I, send a book to them and let them publish it as an Arkham House book. When that book sold, then I would get a certain percentage of the money of each sale. So I would give them money back I paid out for the rights. I don't know if I ever came out even or not. I never checked it out. Somewhere close to being even, I guess. I think 636 copies of Always Come Dayton was published. I think it's $800 and something for all 636 copies. The last 100 copies were labeled on the spine correctly. They put the labeling on the spine on all the other copies backwards. That's not terribly important, I don't think. I understand the copy is worth about $600 nowadays in good shape. That's a little bit better than buying stock.
And I led directly to the Callow youth from Pasadena, Texas, being the agent. How did that come about?
Thank you. Starting in '61, I started the Howard Collector, which is a small fanzine. I based the title on Ray Zorn's The Lovecraft Collector. Oscar Friend had died recently, and his widow and his daughter, Kitty Friend, were closing the agency down. So the Kirkendalls, I'm talking about Mrs. P.M. Kirkendall and Alla Ray Morris, her daughter, had asked her to get a professional agent. They had asked L. Sprague DeCamp to be the agent, but DeCamp didn't want to do that. He had other businesses he wanted to fool with, and he suggested me, since I had more or less had an interest in Howard, so I took it on, even though I didn't know anything about being an agent. That was in '65. I had the good fortune, I guess it was, of making the air something like about $2.5 million net in the time I was agent. Okay.
Well, you had to get assignments from short stories till that bit of the business, because somebody was suggesting that maybe the heirs didn't have the rights to the Common stories, right? So you had to go looking for assignments to protect them.
You mean that was later on in the Common Story? That was just before that.
Was after you became an agent, right?
That was just before the formation of Conan Properties.
Oh, okay. Well, tell us about the formation of Conan Properties.
I don't know if any of you are familiar with L. Sprague Camp. I'm sure you are. I had a lot of problems with the man, I have to say. He claimed he had all the rights just to the Conan stories, or that's their public domain. He had checked out with the Library of Congress on the titles of the individual stories, and of course there wasn't anything listed on those titles. So Kirby McCauley, who had helped me, suggested that I go down and check the copyright books on Weird Tales, not just the title of the story. So I checked the copyright books on Weird Tales and found out that some of them had been renewed by Steinberg Press, some by Blanchard Press, and others. So I got an assignment. I think I paid $10 for an assignment for the Conan stories that had been renewed. That's not all the Conan stories were renewed, just some of them. Of course, there were some Conan stories that were in good shape, like the ones that the camp turned into Conan stories for Norm Press in '55. And there was the stories like The Right Stranger and The God in the Bowl. Those were in good, copyrights were in good shape.
Of course, during the 1950s, Oscar Friend had made Dr. Kirkendall an offer that it turned out he could refuse, right?
Mm-hmm. I think Dr. Kirkendall had made an offer to sell the Conan stories to Oscar Friend, but it wasn't a terrific lot of money. But Oscar Friend had kept cutting the price he was willing to pay. So finally, Dr. Kirkendall said he thought he would just continue as it was going. Norm Press, by the way, owed the Howard Ayers quite a bit of money whenever Marty Greenberg decided to shut Norm Press down. And by the way, we never did get the money.
What was it that Friend had offered Dr. Kirkendall? Was it about $12.50 or something?
I think about $1,250.
That's for all the rights to the Conan stories, which, as Glenn said, ended up making about $2 million. Well, go ahead and tell us, one of the great stories that you've been involved in is your detective work in finding finding a box of the Howard manuscripts. Tell us about tracking that down.
It all started about after the publication of All That Comes Eating. I finally found E. Hoffman Price in Redwood City, California. I went out there in '61 and visited him, and I asked him if he had any Howard stuff. He gave me a roll of microfilm with some poetry on it that R.H. Barlow had made when the Druid Press was looking at the idea of publishing Howard poetry. So Price told me he thought he had a box full of tear sheets, is what he called them, that Dr. Kirkendall had sent him. He said, well, I think I loaned them to a guy named Stuart Boland. So he said, all right, Boland, and asked him to send them to you. He wrote Boland. Boland was in, I think, South America at the time. But he replied, he came back and said, well, I gave the box to Francis T. Laney. Only trouble was Laney had died just recently. So I more or less forgot about it. make any difference anyway, just tear sheets. But when I became agent, I got all of the Oscar Freeman records, and there was an inventory of stories made by apparently Otis Klein. There were titles I had never heard of, so I got to thinking, well, maybe those weren't just tear sheets, maybe they were manuscripts. So I wrote to Boland, and I asked him if he could help me find a box of tear sheets or manuscripts, whatever they are. So offered money. That was a perfect offer, because Boland immediately said, when he told me he just run across a lady named Dominica G, who was Francis T. Laney had hired to retype his manuscripts. That's a job I wouldn't want, by the way. And I didn't believe him from the word go, because he didn't give me a name, just Dominica G. But anyway, he gave me a price, and I paid him a few $100s, and I got a box full of manuscripts. On total, I got about 3 boxes of manuscripts, and I finally got all the letters to H.P. Lovecraft that Boland also had. So I suspected I paid Boland something like $1,000 altogether for all that stuff.
Do you know how much material you've got there? How many stories, poems, and so how many pages?
Well, it's several reams anyway, for sure. If you can imagine somebody taking a front-end loader and dumping about 10 reams of loose papers, into a box, you can figure what kind of job I had sorting all this stuff out.
So it'll take you about a week, right?
Yeah, basically.
How many hours have you spent over a photocopier sending copies to people like me?
You mean you?
Or my friend in Paris?
Yeah. Oh, probably 30 minutes.
When it comes to Robert E. Howard, do you have favorite stories and characters?
Oh, I like Breckinridge Elkins. I like Solomon Kane. Now, I like Cole also, even though most of the stories are not really fantasy except in the setting.
Any particular stories of those characters you like best?
Oh, the Mirrors of Tuzun, Skulls and the Stars, I like. Well, it's just difficult to say. I like so many different ones. You know, I like the historical also. The Souls of the Thunder, a Shadow of the Vulture, the Line of Tiberius.
What appeals to you about Howard?
I like the vivid action and the feeling in the stories. There's no boredom to the stories. You're into the story immediately if you're reading it.
Leaving aside Conan, because we know that publishing was already sort of underway by the time you became the agent. As the agent, what were your goals with regard to Robert E. Howard?
Well, the goals for the heirs was to make them some money, because they'd only made something like in the previous time between 37, that's the year after Howard died, and 65, when I became agent, they had received something like maybe $6,000 gross in royalties. I'm talking about all the heirs. I'm talking about Dr. Howard, Dr. Kirkendall, and Mrs. Kirkendall, who of course received the monies from Dr. Kirkendall when he died.
But when you went and set about trying to get Howard work published, did you have a game plan, or did people approach you? Did you go seeking them out?
I just went seeking them out. I was lucky, I suppose. I found the Robert W. Lowndes magazine O'Hara. I submitted some manuscripts to them, and I put together a book of short stories and submitted them to Lancer Books. That was Wolf's Head and others. And I put together the Brand McMorris stories, and I submitted that to the Lancer Books, but the editor at Lancer went to Dale. He took the book with him, with my blessing, and so that's why it was a Dale book.
Somebody was asking, do you have what's your opinion of the pastiches and the unauthorized continuations and other publications of Howard?
Can I do it this way?
Y'all weren't there at Howard Days last year. Glenn was on a panel with Roy Thomas, and somebody asked him what his opinion was of the first Conan comic, and he said, well, it didn't make me vomit. And David and Morgan and I were talking last night about this. When you put together the book of Robert E. Howard and the second book of Robert E. Howard for Zebra, did you have a grand plan in mind for those?
Just a sort of a sampler of different Robert E. Howard stories.
Did you pick them because the stories themselves appealed to you, or just because they represented a range, or hadn't been published? Or?
Well, some of each.
I'll ask y'all if you have any questions. Jump in here.
Do you have any stories about Howard and yourself with August Derleth and Arkham?
Do you have any questions, or do you have any stories about August Derleth and Arkham House and you and Howard? You know that all this comes even.
Well, no, I got along with Derleth pretty well. He treated me pretty fairly. I suppose one of the last stories that August Derleth ever completed was The House in the Oaks. That was an unfinished manuscript, and he completed it, and then he went home and died, you might say, because he died very shortly thereafter.
How did Zebra come about to be such a major publisher of Howard during the 70s?
Kirby McCauley was in touch with Zebra. Funny thing about it, the president of the head of Zebra was a guy named Walter Zacharias, who had been president of Lancer Books, and also the editor at Zebra was a lady who had worked for Lancer Books, so I suppose they knew about Howard from Lancer Books.
Rusty?
Oh, sorry.
What did you think of The Whole Wide World, and how do you think it depicted Robert E. Howard?
I think it's a good movie.
You think D'Onofrio caught the essence of Howard?
Fairly well. I tell you this though, when Nolan first wrote One Who Walked Alone, I sent it to Donald Grant, and Grant sent it back saying, I like it, but it's too much about Nolan and not enough about R.E.H. So I asked her to rewrite it. With some trepidation, she did so, and that was what was published.
And of course, the guys who did the movie then were students of hers, and And so now the complaint that we sometimes hear online is that there's too much of novel and not enough variation. And I'm like, well, it's told from her point of view.
Yeah, just the title is He Walked Alone, so, it's kind of the whole wide world.
Any other questions? Yeah.
In your working career, did you have anything to do with Secret Quinn?
No, I did write to Quinn once, asking if he had ever corresponded with Howard, but he replied he had not. I think he died not too long after that.
69.
So I'm surprised, were there any of the other Weird Tales authors that you have much dealings with?
I used to know Kirk Mashburn. That was one of E. Hoffman Price's closest friends. He lived in Houston. That's the only weird tale writer or anything you deal with, I guess.
What was Kirk like?
Oh, he was a kind of quiet guy. He had a bad case of emphysema, I believe it was, and that's what killed him. But he was also opinionated, kind of like Rice, but wasn't quite so blunt about some things. Price would tell you that you're a wage slave because you work for a living. And he had other strong opinions about everything. Some of them I won't repeat.
So he and Clyde Smith might have got along pretty good.
Possibly. Clyde Smith didn't think much of DeCam.
Clyde Smith said was a pretty strongly opinionated guy from what I gather.
Yes.
Tell us about your first meeting with Clyde.
Terry Clyde Smith.
Yeah. Tell us about your first meeting. Tell us about your first meeting with Clyde Smith.
I came to Brownwood and I called him up a couple of times, and finally he wouldn't answer the phone. And finally I got an invitation to come to his house. And I talked to him briefly. After that, though, he started calling me on the phone. So it wasn't too long before he got kind of friendly. Even though he had a box full of letters from R.D. Howard, he never told me about those. It was only after his death that his nephew, Roy Barkley, found the letters and told me about them.
You met David Lee too, right? One of
Yeah.
Howard's best friends. What was David Lee like?
Just a big, quiet guy. He told me, I asked him about the Howard rumored collision with the flagpole and Rising Star. He said, yeah, I was one of them. He named the other guys who were with him. So I guess there was a collision with the flagpole.
But Howard might have exaggerated it just a little bit.
Yeah, he exaggerated nearly everything he did.
And Lindsay Tyson you met and got along with too, right?
Oh, yes.
So all three of Robert's best friends up there, you have met.
Yes.
I think you're one of the few people who met Dave. Howard thinks he met David Lee before he died.
I think, let's see, Howard Waldrop must have made him.
Yes, Tom.
When did the town of Cross Plains really start to recognize the celebrity value of Howard and start to take advantage of that?
I'm not quite sure exactly when, but I guess it must have been in the 80s. Is that when they bought the Howard House?
Yeah.
About the 80s when they bought the Howard House. the Howard House has just been sitting there, and all grown up with ivy on the side of the building. They have restored it pretty well and got period furniture in it. It's pretty nice now. It's made it kind of a museum out of it.
Were you out there watering it down when the fire started?
Oh no.
The next door neighbor was literally out there with his garden hose, watering it down before the fire department got there.
Do they get a lot of visitors besides on Howard days?
Yeah.
So throughout the years?
Throughout the year, if you're ever in Cross Plains and there's a number on the side of the house that you can call, and somebody will come down and show you around. They've had this past, I guess it was last year, just after Howard Days, Bruce Boxleitner, the actor, was at a rodeo in Abilene and decided to make the side trip over, and turned out he's a big Howard fan. Scott?
Let's see, I got a twofold question for Glenn. Glenn, from the time you started working on Always Comes Evening in the 50s to the time that Clark Ashton Smith died in the 60s, did you ever contact him via letter or telephone?
You talking about Smith?
Clark Ashton Smith, yeah.
I visited him in 1959,
In Auburn?
Pacific Grove.
Oh, Pacific Grove.
Yeah, I went to his house and there was a sign on the wall that says, "Warning, artists at work, do not knock or ring before 6 p.m. I wasn't about to drive all the way back to Texas, I had to drive all the way to California. So I knocked. The dragon lady, if I can use that term, came to the door. Smith was behind her. I said, "I'm the guy who compiled the Arkham House collection, Always Comes Evening." So she invited me in. So I got to visit with Smith. She went back upstairs with somebody else. And Smith was kind of an uncommunicated sort of person. He's quite a quiet guy. I found out that the book at Arkham House had announced at one time like it was supposed to be an inventory of Smith's carvings. He was supposed to have been working on that, but it never came out. I don't know why. I wish I had bought a Smith's carving while I was there, but I didn't.
Okay, John?
Dual friend of ours, Dan Gobbin, has the rejection letter that Howard got from Thrills of the Jungle. And since Hersey's sort of a pet project of mine, I found that kind of interesting that Hersey sent back his story. Are there a lot of rejection letters left in the Howard estate?
Oh, not terribly a bunch of them. There was a bunch of them. It was a bunch. I said a bunch. I'd say about 20 or 30 maybe altogether in the box of material I got from Boland.
What was the magazines? Do you recall?
The magazines,
The magazines that rejected Howard.
Weird Tales.
oh, Weird Tales, and of course, McFadden Publications was one rejection, and he got rejected by the Sterling Group several times, Legal Marketers. He got rejected by H. Bittner of Argosy.
That's my favorite rejection letter. It says, it's real simple. It just says, "Dear Mr. Howard, The Night of the Wolf is a lot too vague and slow moving for Argosy." If you ever read The Night of the Wolf, and then you read Argosy, a Fred McIsaac story, you're like, what?
The Black Bear Bike was rejected by Far East Adventures.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And back there.
You know, in Hollywood, Arnold Schwarzenegger made Conan, Barbarian movie. Were you involved in the negotiations on that?
talked.
Were you involved in the movie negotiations, getting the movie done?
No, Uncle Lieberman did most of that. That was the attorney for Corn Properties.
But the movie led directly to the formation of Common Properties, right?
Yeah, that was the idea for the formation, so there wouldn't be any dissent among the rights owners, so they could negotiate with the movie company with one face. Speaking of Arthur Lieberman, that reminds me, he was a Jewish lawyer, in case you can tell by his name. He visited Schwarzenegger at his apartment or home, and when he walked in, Arnold was playing Hitler speeches on his loudspeaker. Trying to make Arnold feel it. Trying to make Lieberman feel at home, I guess.
7 months of negotiations.
Scott?
Speaking of negotiations, Glenn, what part did you take in the Lancer negotiations?
Lancer, actually none. That was the camp.
So you didn't work as agent to coordinate any kind of monies for, he had all the properties, he had all the negotiating what rights, or they didn't go through you guys at all?
Well, the camp did that on his own.
Right.
However, when I got ready to sell the comic book rights, I went ahead and sold them. I didn't talk to the camp or answer either one about that, because I hadn't given any rights.
How did you get the comic book rights going?
Well, Roy Thomas had written a letter asking would it be possible to get rights to the character for the comic books for Marvel. I said, sure. So that's who I dealt with.
And he offered you a vast amount of money, right?
Well, not exactly a vast amount, but better than nothing.
How do you think the comics affected the popularity of Howard's work?
Well, I'm sure there's people here who don't care for them, but they help somewhat.
Did you see a big boost in people requesting rights to Howard stories, or a little bit, or none?
A little bit.
When you look around at the state of Howard Publishing today, do you have any thoughts on that?
It seems to be coming back very strongly. It's one thing is not being messed up by a bunch of pastiches. At least most of the books or works nowadays are authentic Howard. It doesn't, somebody else has written and stuck in there with it, like the Campbell and Carter did with the Conan stories and so forth.
Are there any particular illustrators of Howard that you like?
Oh, I like Gianni, and I like, of course, Frazetta. And there are others also.
Marcus Boas.
No.
Any other questions out there? Back.
Who handles the rights to the Howard estate now? Glenn is retired. Is going to another venue?
There's a young lady named Lee Stone at Paradox Entertainment that is the licensing manager and handles all the rights.
The Howard estate has been sold, of course, corner properties too have been sold to Paradox Entertainment.
Yeah, they first bought Common Properties, and then later they bought Robert E. Howard Properties, so they own all of Robert E. Howard's works under one umbrella now. They're mainly, again, they're a licensing company, and so they're primarily interested in role-playing games and movies and the like. And they last year approached me and Paul Herman about creating a nonprofit foundation, the Robert E. Howard Foundation, that I put a flyer out there to work with getting most of Robert E. Howard's work into print, but also to promote scholarship of Robert, with Robert E. Howard studies, to try to get all of his work back into print, to promote Howard Days and Project Pride at the Robert E. Howard Museum. So they were really instrumental in helping set up this nonprofit foundation that would try to advance the state of Robert E. Howard studies. But they recognized, part of it is that they said they recognized that their expertise was in licensing and films and money-making stuff, not publishing. You got any other thoughts you want to share with people about Paul's pulp collecting? Something this crowd might be interested in?
You might be interested in the various countries where there have been Howard publications. It's been published in several editions in Brazil. He has appeared in Argentina briefly. He has appeared in Japan, naturally, in Turkey, Bulgaria, Romania, Estonia, Croatia, Finland, Norway, Sweden, Hungary, Italy, Germany, Belgium, France, Netherlands, Spain, just about all of Europe except Austria and Switzerland.
Yeah, I recall you once asking me for if I know anybody who knew Greek.
Yeah, he appeared in Greece also.
Which reminds me, do we have anybody here who knows Russian? Because Glenn's got a Russian book that he wants to know what the title is.
Which foreign language editions have sold the best?
Which foreign language editions have sold this?
I don't know for sure.
They didn't always provide royalty statements, I think. But he's really popular in some countries. Morgan said he found there used to be a lot of Robert E. Howard in Russia, right?
Used to be, but when I was there,
Not so much now.
Moscow in December, there's nothing.
Oh, yeah, if you're in St. Petersburg, you can go to Severo Zapad Press. That stands for Northwest Press in St. Petersburg. They have published editions of Conan, K-O-H-A-H, in Cyrillic. That's K-O-N-A-N if you want in English alphabet. They have something like 130-something titles on their list so far. That's hardbacks, about 300-something pages each one.
And all Robert E. Howard material, right?
Oh no. Most of it versions written under English names, like Olive Locknett or some Wainwright. You can just about pick any kind of name you want, and they've used them.
Tom, did you have a question, or were you cutting this off?
Just give me 5 more.
Okay. Speaking of pulps, I know that for a while you were thinking about working on an index to fight stories, or maybe the Fiction House magazines, but you gave that up.
No, I haven't given it up, just sort of retired it for the time being.
So, Tom?
Is there a gratification in seeing all the material off the typescripts as Howard wrote it with the Wandering Starboats and the other editions that come out where they no longer have an editor's hand on them?
Do you feel any gratification in seeing stuff that comes directly from the typescripts as opposed to being heavily edited?
Yes, but of course we don't have manuscripts or typescripts for some of the stories. because, you know, most of the magazines, pulp magazines, they would just destroy the manuscript until they reset the material.
Do you recall which fanzine you read about at Dalmeric?
I don't recall which one I've heard rumors, strong rumors that Farnsworth Wright completed Dalmeric.
It was in some fanzine. I remember you telling me that you'd seen it in some fanzine that there was a first draft that tailed up into a synopsis, which Howard did frequently. And then the beginning of the second draft, and they used the beginning of the second draft and then the synopsis. But of course, most of us don't think chapter 12 is really
the Howard agent's records don't indicate who completed it. Obviously, it wasn't Otis Klein, because he was taking his cut, and he would show it if he did. Oscar Friend didn't show anything, so he would took his cut too.
Scott, or I guess John had his.
Go ahead, Scott.
Glenn, did you have any opinion about the editing Don Grant did on the Solomon Kane and some of the other ones concerning racism in Howard? And did you feel he shouldn't have taken that out? Or?
I didn't know that had happened. I don't think he should have bothered with it.
What do you feel about the controversy that's sort of brewed that apparently one of the reasons for Howard committing suicide is because he was owed so much money by Farnsworth Wright?
You know, it depends on whether you want to commit suicide over $800. That's why he was owed $800-something.
You may have answered this already, and if so, I apologize, but where are the Howard papers today? What exists there?
What do you mean with papers?
Are there any manuscripts, letters, and so forth? Are they in a library or a collection somewhere?
I've got most of them.
Oh, yeah, for that answer.
I guess you could say it's in my collection.
It's not going to give you the address of the storage. But you have plans for them, don't you?
Yeah, eventually.
Can you tell us?
Eventually.
Maybe I'll put them in a Pulpcon auction. Who knows?
You heard it here first. That's a good reason for people to start attending Pulpcon.
Rusty, this is more a question for you. For those of us who have not been across Plains, were we to go there, the items in the house and things, are there any of Robert Howard's actual items still in the house?
There's a
typewriter or his writing desk, or I mean,
his actual typewriter. No, allegedly a collector named Jay Cornett in California owns that typewriter, and he's got a chain of provenance. Some people question it's controversial, but he supposedly has that. Sprague Camp donated a bust of Cleopatra that Howards had owned. Supposedly it was one of Robert's acquisitions from New Orleans when he was 13. A little camel inkwell that a Syrian member of the legislature, he was a merchant who I guess knew the Howards, had given to Robert. There are 3 framed prints in the living room that belong to the Howards. So there's a few items. And then Don Heron last year, through a friend of his, found some of Dr. Howard's books that had been in somebody's attic, and he donated those to Project Pride, and they're sitting in the living room now in a nice little glass front bookcase. So
it's all about the recreation. There are some.
There's some authentic stuff in there, and the recreation is really nicely done too. So I think anybody who's a Howard fan, or a Pulp fan, certainly owes it to themselves to.
He did not have a high Williams electric, by the way.
Pardon?
I say he did not have a high Williams electric, by the way, or a computer either.
No, so if you find those typescripts that look like they were done on a Selectric, that was probably one of his transcripts. You were saying earlier you didn't envy that job, the woman making the transcripts, but you made a lot of them yourself.
Yeah. Some cases it would be poor quality carbons. Some cases the paper would just be torn up.
This business of Weird Tales owing Howard so much money, did they do that because they knew he was way down in Texas and wasn't likely to show up at their door when he died? Or and this Klein was right there, and Klein had contacts with Bright. Did Howard ever feel that Klein wasn't doing the job for him up there? Or, how did he get in that deep?
Klein actually, yeah.
Klein was in Chicago.
Yeah, but Howard actually, when he tried to get he gave some stuff to August Leninger, and he gave some stuff to, or not Leninger, he talked to Leninger, but he gave some stuff to Copeland, the agent for him, and then Klein got a shirt up about it. But Howard was trying to get some other people to agent his stuff. I think he was thinking that maybe Klein wasn't aggressive enough about marketing.
Howard sold directly to Weird Tales. He didn't go through an agent.
That's right. Yeah. He sold directly to Fiction House too, didn't
No, I think he went through an agent on Fiction House.
I'm about halfway through Price's Book of the Dead. I've been putting that off for several years. That's just a terrific book. And Price pretty much comes out and says that Weird Tales had money and they just weren't paying him. And he says that
that's what Price says, and that's what he told Dr. Howard, and Dr. Howard certainly believed that. Said Price talking, Can you absolutely believe it or not? Yeah, they owed him a lot of money. It was the Depression. They owed him a lot of money.
You wouldn't want to bet your shirt anything E. Hoffman Price told you.
And also, Don, I know Don was going on and on about and Howard probably hated Farnsworth Wright and stuff because they owed him so much money. But you read the correspondence of E.H. Price and H.P. Lovecraft and those guys and Clark Ashton Smith, and man, those guys savaged Farnsworth Wright. They just slagged on him right and left. Robert E. Howard almost never said anything negative about Farnsworth Wright to these guys. He really didn't badmouth him at all. So I don't think Howard really had that hard a feeling toward Wright. I think he wanted his money, and he was upset that he wasn't getting the money that he needed, but mainly because of his mother's health, he needed cash. And so when the letter that he wrote about how badly I needed cash, I mean, that was the time when they were really strapped. His mother needed some immediate medical care, and he needed cash, and they missed a payment. So I think that was what got him upset. Okay.
If Howard had lived, in what direction do you think he would have gone? Would he have lived more western?
What direction do you think he would have gone if he'd lived?
He probably would have started writing Western stories more frequently than he had been. Street and Smith paid him whenever he sold stuff to them. I suspect that was one of the reasons he was willing to go with Street and Smith on Westerns or adventure stories. You get a check for Street and Smith, you wouldn't get a check from Popular Fiction.
Okay, well, we got the high sign. It's time for us to give way to the radio players, I think. Thanks all for coming.
You've been listening to a Pulp Event podcast, brought to you by the Pulp Net. When your next adventure was just a dime away. Please visit us online at thepulp.net. Thank you for listening, and keep reading the pulps.